and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
I wish we had better news. The Trump Supreme Court this week moved to allow his ban on transgender troops to go into effect.
Well, a little better news. More Democrats have declared for president, including the out gay mayor of South Bend, Indiana.
Lesbians lost an anti-discrimination suit against a retirement community in Missouri.
A conversion therapist is going gay, but he won't renounce his past work.
Yes, we want you to boycott him. Many community losses to tell you about, including 3 lesbian pioneers.
Parents Magazine has published a gay cover picture for the first time in a century.
We have horrors to report from Indonesia, Chechnya, and Egypt.
But progress in Kenya, Bangladesh, and the Czech Republic.
That's encouraging. And the Oscar nominations are very gay, lesbian, and bisexual.
We'll run those down.
Yes.
All right. Well, the Supreme Court is the big headline this week, and here's the deal. Trump, in July of 2017, in a fit of insanity, now a constant stream, tweeted out one morning that he was going to throw trans people out of the military.
Completely.
Well, he wanted to appease the right wing, but he went farther than even they expected him to go, and it's been a fight ever since. So,
but he pulled back from that a little bit.
Well, yes and no.
He was forced to.
Kind of. Those are
So he found
nuances.
a new way to
well,
get us.
Here's the thing. They issued a policy eventually that was a little slightly different. We now have 4 lawsuits operating against any version of the ban of transgender people serving in the military, as reputedly almost 15,000 of them do now,
right.
Honorably and with distinction.
Yeah.
So the 4 lawsuits are going on, and they're moving their way up through the courts. And the Trump administration has been asking the Supreme Court to forget all the intermediate courts and just make an immediate decision, throwing out the lawsuits and allowing the ban on trans service to go into effect.
Yes, because three of the courts have put national injunctions against the policy.
And the 4th one, I think, did too, or sort of, but we just sort of lost in that 4th court. So it gets to the Supreme Court, these various requests, and the Supreme Court this week said, all right, 2 of those injunctions against the ban have to go. We are lifting the injunction. If you want to put the ban in, you can do it in terms of these cases. There is one case left where the injunction is still in place.
Maryland?
Yes. And so now, presumably, the Trump administration will go back into court to get that injunction lifted too, and then they will be free to, if they want to, institute the ban on trans service with some caveats until the Supreme Court, a year from now maybe, decides overall whether you can throw trans people out of the military.
One of the caveats is they're saying, if you already came out, you can stay, even though you're unfit for service.
Yes, and if you're serving but you haven't come out, you can still serve as long as you don't take hormones and you serve as your biological sex.
Don't ask, don't tell.
What was the other one originally? Don't ask, don't tell, don't something. Anyway, it's essentially don't act. You can have the psychological status of being trans, but you can't do anything about it.
The Human Rights Campaign is hopeful that the Supreme Court will listen to the arguments in this case.
Don't hold your breath.
Forget that. And one of the worst parts, now, of course, the Trump administration wanted this to all go very quickly, and they wanted the Supreme Court to take the case right away. But by the court waiting until now, the case is not going to be heard until the next term.
Well, the court specifically refused to to do what the Trump administration asked them to do, which was to leapfrog the intermediate courts.
Now, there is still an opportunity in the lower courts to build a record, a fact record that will eventually go before the Supreme Court. But these 5 guys have made up their minds already, the Trump court people. And
Roberts, Alito, Thomas, Kavanaugh, and Gorsuch.
My God.
Surprise!
Which is why I keep, and I'm not the only one doing this, saying when the Democrats get power again, they need to expand the court and rebalance it, since the Republicans have packed it, and by breaking norms.
Well, there's a freshman representative from Colorado on the Judiciary Committee or some committee in the House now, who wants to investigate Kavanaugh for lying in his confirmation hearings in an attempt to build an impeachment case.
Why not?
Well, fine, but the Senate isn't going to impeach him. Anyway, so I had several questions about this, so I asked people in the know. And my first question was, what is the Supreme Court's rationale for doing this? What is their excuse for lifting the injunctions?
Well, first of all, you have to understand what the arguments of the Trump administration are, is that we need to be a lethal force, and this would inhibit that.
Well, that's not the basis on which they lifted the injunctions. The actual answer is they gave no excuse. They simply said, we're lifting these 2 injunctions, you can do what you want. No excuse. But the sort of informal explanation from both the Trump administration and the court was, we're not happy that these district courts around the country, federal courts, but lower jurisdiction, are suddenly issuing injunctions in lots of different cases that are supposed to cover the whole country.
Right and left.
Yes, and particularly right. And that one judge in Texas who keeps issuing national injunctions.
He's the king of the United States.
Yes. So ostensibly, part of this is to try to inhibit that kind of practice. So lifting these national injunctions to send a message to the lower courts. But the real thing is they didn't give any reason or excuse for lifting these injunctions. And then I wanted to know, okay, so people who are serving openly, can they continue to take hormones and do whatever they need medically to be who they are? And the answer was yes. Those who are serving openly as trans can continue their course.
They are grandparented in.
Yes.
It's
grandfathered in is what they used to say.
Yes.
I see that you're amending it. And of course, one of the excuses of the administration is because they need ongoing medical interventions, that makes them unfit for battle. But of course, many, many millions of people need ongoing medical interventions in and out of the military, and that has never stopped.
From every perspective, it's insane.
Yeah.
The military is having trouble recruiting people as it is. Young people don't care about this. The people they're recruiting don't care about it anyway. And it is absolutely heartbreaking, the signal they're sending to the entire society that transgender people are unfit people. It's just outrageous.
You have only to watch the recent documentary about the trans military people serving in the military when trans that is so clear about people's worth and dignity and effectiveness.
This is a president who was punishing not just transgender troops, but 800,000 federal employees and many more contractors.
And their families and friends and businesses.
Got to get this
Well, my
under
last
control.
question on this was, what about the people who are not out, who are trans people serving? Maybe their unit knows, but others don't, and they are taking hormones or doing whatever they need to do.
Well, then you can get rid of somebody by turning them in, like you did with the gay thing.
That if they are discovered to be taking hormones and serving as trans, but not openly, you can serve as trans not openly if you're not doing anything about it, but if you are actually on medications, then you are subject to discharge. So now those people are faced with the exquisite dilemma of, do I come out before the ban is put in place because then that secures my place, or do I stay closeted? And there's no easy answer to that.
On a larger issue, and there is a larger issue, the court looks as if it has not decided what to do about all these cases that look at discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity as sex discrimination. They did not come out of the conferences, did they?
No, and we're still waiting on those and not optimistic. We're not optimistic on anything out of this Supreme Court.
No, that's why we need an expanded Supreme Court
But we're
by modifying the Judiciary Act written by Anne's ancestor in the 1700s. I'm not exaggerating.
Yeah, well, we're so reassured, though, because the State Department put out a statement saying that they were deeply disturbed by reports from Chechnya of, attacks on gay people, men and women, in being arrested, brutalized, imprisoned, some killed. Russia should investigate and should secure people's rights.
The government of Chechnya denies anything as bad as going on.
I'm sure that's good enough for the State Department.
Yes. Well,
Also, a couple of other things from the Trump administration. Vice President Pence is very upset that we're attacking his wife for teaching in a discriminatory Christian school.
So Lady Gaga is upset with him and sounded off at her concert about that. And won an Academy Award nomination or two.
Pence said, stop attacking Christian education. Like Christian border separation? Is that the kind of thing they're doing?
No, good Christian education like they get at Covington Catholic High School.
And we told you last week, I think, that South Carolina's Child Welfare Agency had asked for a waiver from the federal government to be allowed to discriminate on the basis of religion in foster care and adoption assignments, and you'll be happy to know that your government, the Department of Health and Human Services, has issued a waiver to South Carolina. They're publicly funded. Your tax dollars money can go to support religious discrimination in foster and adoptive child care.
You may want to think of moving to California, where Governor Gavin Newsom appointed Chris Perry to lead child development efforts in the state. She was the lead plaintiff in the challenge to the state's ban on same-sex challenge on marriage equality, and she is a lesbian.
Well, she was one of the plaintiffs in the marriage case.
Yes.
So in New York, we, of course, this last weekend and around the country, were demonstrating against the administration with more women's marches, the third year of that. There were several iterations of it, but we ended up in Grand Central Terminal.
Well, these charming demonstrators, young people, were leading us. One has a sign that says, the one thing that should be separated is the White House and Trump, and the other one said, all girls deserve rights. These kids. But we were there with a lot of disabled people who were also protesting the lack of accessibility of some of our own marches.
Yes. And then one of the events in New York was a rally at Columbus Circle and a march. And a couple of the speakers there were trans activist Hannah Simpson and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who wound up taking a nice little picture together. There they are, Hannah on the left, AOC on the right. And AOC reached out for and was given that little pin you see on her coat that is a rainbow flag and a trans rights flag intertwined or crossed, which she wore very proudly.
She basically dedicated her march to transgender rights and also held up a big sign about her, push for a green economy or a green country.
She also later participated in a video game fundraiser for trans kids.
This was out of the United Kingdom, and it raised $340,000 in 57 hours, and she called into it.
And so did Cher, and so did Chelsea Manning.
Well,
so that was a successful little action.
All right. And then we learned a little bit more about William Barr, who's up for Attorney General since we last spoke to you. He was defending his role in setting up prison camps for asylum seekers with HIV during the AIDS crisis.
Oh my
he
God.
said, well, you know, there was a total ban on people with HIV from coming in those days when he was Attorney General under George H.W. Bush. But this was a squalid camp in Guantanamo Bay, mostly for Haitian people, and there was Cory Booker, by the way, did question him about LGBT issues and his anti-gay views, which he tried to fudge.
These guys are reprehensible, every last one of them, but are we going to be able to defeat them? No, because Mitch McConnell is still in league with the president. All right, but let's get to political things. So the other big headline this week was the entry into the presidential race of the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Why do we care about him? Because he is an out gay politician.
He's also
Pete Buttigieg.
He's also Buttigieg. They call him Mayor Pete. He's also, a very appealing Midwestern candidate and a millennial candidate.
Yes, he is.
And he
37 years old.
He made a point about talking about that. Saying that mine will be the first generation that's going to do worse than our parents, and we have done that to the younger generation. And I say younger, 37. We burdened them with all this college debt. We have taken away public services. We have cut the top rate on taxes so that there's no money for public services and the subways and the roads, and the bridges are all falling down. We have done all this, and he wants to turn that around.
Well, the Republicans have done it with tax cuts to the rich and expensive
which the Democrats all went along with.
Yes, and wars.
Bill Bradley was in league with Ronald Reagan in 1981 when the top rate in the United States for high incomes was 70%. Well, now we're down to in the 30s, for God's sakes. You want to know why there's no money. And when you let rich people keep all their money, what do they do with it? They buy the government. And then they just set everything up for themselves.
So Mayor Pete did a standard campaign video to introduce himself to the voters and included a substantial shot of him and his husband at home on the couch and the dog and all of that. But then he did a video specifically for the LGBTQ community that was put out by the Victory Fund, which supports our candidates. And so we thought we would show you that one to show you what he is saying directly to us.
Hi, I'm Pete Buttigieg, and I'm mayor of the city of South Bend, Indiana. And I'm so excited to share with fellow members of the LGBTQ community and the Victory Fund that today I'm launching an exploratory committee to run for President of the United States. I'm mindful of the historic nature of a potential candidacy, seeking to be the first ever out nominee of a major party in American presidential politics. I know what this kind of representation means and how much it matters, partly because I grew up in Indiana. Mike Pence was the governor of our state when I came out publicly during a re-election campaign for mayor. And when I joined the military, don't ask, don't tell was still the law of the land. I've seen how much leadership matters, and I've seen the kind of changes that can happen too, but they don't happen on their own. This is so important, especially for my generation. I belong to a generation that provided most of the troops in the wars after 9/11 that's going to be experiencing climate change in an extremely serious way. It's the generation that stands to be the first to make less than our parents if something doesn't change, but also the first generation to know marriage equality as the norm, and perhaps the first generation where someone can announce a campaign for president with his husband at his side. It's an extraordinary moment, and I'm so excited about the work that we can do together. But I also know that for us to get very far, I'm going to need to be able to count on fellow members of the LGBTQ community to be there at my side. I hope that we'll have a chance to work together. I hope I can earn your support, and I hope to make you proud.
He seems to be a popular mayor. He's been reelected.
Well, he ran for head of the Democratic National Committee, and he ran a very, I thought, good campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't win. I mean, but
his
it was
candidacy,
very appealing.
His presidential candidacy is being taken completely seriously by newscasters and others.
The country, if you might remember, the country was in a hell of a lot of trouble in 2008, and they turned to an African American to become the president, which we didn't think was going to happen in our lifetime.
Oh, well,
so
of course, but
we're in a worse mess now, and I think a guy like this could be the kind of antidote to the horrors of the Bush years. Not that a lot of others couldn't. There are a lot of great
I'm just saying he's being treated as a legitimate candidate, and that's not something any of us expected anytime soon, but there it is. So we also have seen the announcement by Kamala Harris, the senator from California. Now, the thing about her is, from our point of view, is that while she was Attorney General of California, the issue arose of trans inmates in California prisons wanting surgery, and because they were in prison, that would be financed by the state, as is all medical care for inmates. And she, as Attorney General, opposed it. So she was asked about this in an early speech here about her candidacy, I think by the Washington Blade. And she said, she gave a very dicey answer at first, which was, well, you're Attorney General of the whole state, and you have the staff, and they're all doing stuff, and you don't always know what they're doing.
What about the buck stops here?
Well, not only that, but she signed those orders or whatever opposing that surgery. So that I don't like at all. But she has evolved on the issue, and she now says that she supports trans inmates having access to medical care of whatever sort. And she seems to have come a long way. But I don't like a kind of fishy answer. At least Kirsten Gillibrand says, I was wrong. I'm ashamed of what I did when I was more conservative, and I have learned and I have changed my mind.
No, a lot of the candidates have evolution and baggage that they bring. I guess all candidates do to some extent, but
and all people,
all human beings, including us. But the one with the worst baggage, of course, is Tulsi Gabbard. We told you about her last week. And, she got hit hard she was an anti-gay activist. So,
representative from Hawaii.
So she put who was not being supported by Senator Mazie Hirono there.
Who really should be running for president.
Who was terrific.
Yeah.
And in fact, Tulsi, who's trying to, become better and more progressive, basically condemned Senator Hirono as a religious bigot for the way she was questioning somebody who was running for judiciary because she questioned about some religion thing during the hearings. And Hirono said, she's not endorsing her congresswoman from her state. She says, I want someone with a long record of support for progressive goals. And this is going to become an issue because, yes, it's great that some of these people have evolved, but they took very strong positions within the last decade, in many cases, that were terrible. So Tulsi's trying to make up for it, so she did a hostage tape. Well, we've seen
all
these
about her past misdeeds around same-sex marriage.
I'm sorry. And she explains a little bit in this tape what happened in her past.
I've always believed in the fundamental rights and equality of all people. But I also grew up in a socially conservative household, where I was raised to believe that marriage should only be between a man and a woman. So for a period of my life, I didn't see the contradiction in those beliefs. While many Americans may be able to relate to growing up in a conservative home, my story's a little different because my father was very outspoken. He was an activist who was fighting against gay rights and marriage equality in Hawaii. And at that time, I forcefully defended him and his cause. But over the years, as I grew up, I formed my own opinions based on my life experiences that significantly changed my views at a very personal level in truly having aloha, love for all people, and making sure that every American, regardless of sexual orientation, is treated equally under the law.
Your next president? I don't think so.
Well, people.
But her dad is very sad that he brought her to this point.
Wow.
And he says, he still believes marriage is between a man and a woman, but he's not quite as vocal about it.
Right. Well, people can change, and there was a Mormon guy who was into conversion therapy. I mean, he did it. His name was David Matheson, and he's now pursuing life as a gay man. However, he will not renounce his past work. I suggest that we renounce him.
The Catholic Archbishop in Denver held a conference this past weekend where he very vociferously urged churches to set up conversion therapy operations, form groups to heal LGBT people. Now, Denver bars regular medical practitioners from doing conversion therapy, for minors at least, and there were demonstrators outside this conference. But this guy is not shutting up. He is really strong about it.
Well, I mean, lots of Catholic dioceses have courage chapters, which is their bid to do conversion therapy.
Well, he's pushing it. And have you read this?
I have not read Andrew Sullivan. I'm not a fan of Andrew Sullivan.
I'm not a fan of Andrew Sullivan either, but if
it's not news to me that half the priests of the Catholic Church are gay.
Well, that's the cover story in the current New York Magazine, if you care.
If he thinks it's all of a sudden going to become a movement where they're all coming out.
I haven't read it.
Well, I know that's, he says they're getting tired of, blah, 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 but come on.
Maybe, whatever.
They just leave. They leave. They go practice in the Episcopal Church. You can't do it in the Catholic Church.
All right, more bad news. A federal court in Missouri has dismissed a discrimination lawsuit by a lesbian couple against the Friendship Village retirement home in Missouri.
In Sunset Hills.
Mary Walsh and Ben Nance, there they are a married couple, but the retirement community is very religiously based and does not want to take them in.
Well, they sued under the Fair Housing Act, and the judge ruled that doesn't bar discrimination based on sexual orientation.
Yeah.
And they said it was based on sex and sex stereotypes. And this is the Eighth Circuit where we're not winning on this whole idea that this is sex discrimination.
It is the 9 millionth case of this sort, and this is where we are at the moment. Talk about a wall.
Well, we win most of them.
Well, we win a lot of them, but we have not won enough, and it is still a continuing debate, and the Supreme Court may knock it all down. And meanwhile, the House of Representatives in Missouri rejected a proposed non-discrimination rule for their staff just for employment because they said that interfered with their religious freedom to hire and fire. This is the House of Representatives in Missouri. They don't want a non-discrimination rule covering sexual orientation.
Well, if we can win some more of these lawsuits like we just won in Virginia, we can make some progress because a federal judge there just chose the redistricting map that is more favorable to Democrats. There are 6 Republican House districts that are now going to be much bluer. And it's all based on racial gerrymandering, and the Republicans are saying they're going to appeal. And we haven't done well at the Supreme Court on these things, but if you add the racial element, that can help.
A couple of good news stories. In Florida, the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services is the first Florida cabinet department to add non-discrimination rules covering sexual orientation and gender identity for its 4,000 employees. Now, this is a state ruled by Republicans.
Governor DeSantis, who refused to put sexual orientation or gender identity into the non-discrimination order, an executive order.
For the state, but the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services is doing it for their employees.
And in New York State here, we passed the Reproductive Health Act, codifying Roe v. Wade in state law. We have a picture of Brad Hoylman, the senator who was the chief sponsor, with Sarah Weddington, who argued in 1973 successfully the Roe v. Wade case. That's very exciting. And Brad is going to be my
guest co-host
of the show next week. And not only did they codify Roe v. Wade, but they passed a bill that's called the Boss Bill, which says if you get an abortion, you can't be retaliated against by your boss for that. And it also protected access to cost-free birth control.
And they outlawed conversion therapy for minors.
Yes, we didn't talk about that last week?
No, I think we just talked about...
we're getting so blasé here. No more conversion therapy. Oh, just for minors.
Gender,
Now, of course, here in the city, we've banned it. We've called it consumer fraud for adults, as some other places have done.
Last week was gender. This week is conversion therapy.
Okay.
All right,
Here's another victory. There's an online service for people who are planning weddings called The Knot, K-N-O-T. And they have removed a Texas venue that refuses gay couples. It's called The Venue, actually. That's the name of it, in Salina, in Texas. And there was a gay couple that tried to use them, and they said, no. We opened our place because we had a talk with God. That's what they said, and you can't come.
In Virginia, the Senate in Virginia passed a sexual orientation and gender identity and expression non-discrimination law for the state. The House, they've done this for several years now. The House of Delegates has to pass it too, and that is up in the air. So we'll keep an eye on that. In Indiana, Representative Bruce Borders, is he the one who's the Elvis impersonator? I think so.
Maybe.
Has introduced a bill to, ban trans people from
That's a bill.
the bathrooms
Let's
they
see where
should
it
be
goes.
using and from sports.
I think I read that in one of the conservative states, the House leader or the Senate leader said, we're not doing this year.
Well, I hope not. And the Lieutenant Governor of Louisiana says don't do anti-LGBT bills because that'll kill business. All right, I think it's time to get to memorializing some people we lost in this last week.
Well, I think we should start with Diane Olson.
Sure.
Diane was the wife of comic activist Robin Tyler. There's Diane on the right. Robin, both longtime activists, and same-sex marriage pioneers. They were the first, I believe, to get married in California.
First to file for marriage rights, with Gloria Allred representing them. They sued for marriage in 2004. They got married in 2008, and then their marriage got invalidated by Prop 8. And Diane, on the right, was the granddaughter of a former governor of California.
Oh, right.
And proud of her long-term sobriety, too, which she did great at.
Right.
So Diane, brain cancer, a big loss, and sad to
Our condolences
lose
to
her.
Robin, who's a very, very dear friend.
Yeah. And then a national figure who died, Mary Oliver, very famous poet, died at 83. She's there on the right in a picture with her longtime partner, Molly Cook. Mary Olson is beloved around the country for her very simple poetry, a lot of natural life and animal images. She won the Pulitzer Prize, the National Book Award. She was adored for her simplicity. She lived in Provincetown for 40 years. One of her most famous poems was The Summer Day, which ends with a famous couplet, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?"
Yes, the most precious thing we have is time. All right, and then a lesbian pioneer, Dolores Knoll, 88 years old, in gay and lesbian issues at Kent State University. She was the first professor there to teach a gay and lesbian studies course. She was the
in 1972.
She was the co-founder of the Kent Gay Liberation Front, which is now called Pride Kent, and she's survived by her partner of 37 years, Pat Hatfield. They died in a home in South Carolina.
They were allowed to live together in the home in South Carolina, or at least they were both in it, as opposed to the Missouri home that was rejecting people. We also lost former Pennsylvania Senator Harris Wofford.
There he is there on the right,
with his husband on the left. They had quite a they were 50 years apart in age. Harris was 90.
They were together.
90
He was
when they married.
He was married to a woman for 50 years.
Yeah.
He was with this guy for 15 when they got married.
Yeah.
And you know, he was very legendary in the civil rights movement.
Yep.
With Dr. King, and he's the one who got Jack Kennedy to get Dr. King out of jail.
Wow.
I mean, that's how far back
Yeah.
he goes. So, but he fell in love with a man. He wasn't particularly active in the gay. He supported the gay movement, but didn't, you know.
Well, he basically came out when he got married in his 90s. And,
When he was 90.
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yep. Never too late.
And we overlooked the death a couple of months ago of Pat Rocco
Yes.
in L.A. He was also a legendary pioneer filmmaker and activist. He was making ecstatic erotic films in the 60s before Stonewall, became quite famous for that. And he also helped organize the first Christopher Street West Pride Parade in L.A.
Wow.
in 1970. He died at age 84. His material, his films, he made a lot of films and a lot of documentaries about the movement. He followed the movement. He was like the West Coast Lou Maletta, I guess, in some ways.
Lou Maletta was our founder.
Yes, but he did both erotic films and documented the movement. And the UCLA Film and Television Archives has an enormous amount of his stuff, which you can find online. If you just Google Pat Rocco, R-O-C-C-O, you'll find a lot of this material. And on March 15th at 7:30 p.m., there's going to be a memorial to him and free screening of a lot of this material hosted by One Archives at the Billy Wilder Theater in L.A. That's March 15th. So Pat Rocco, amazing guy.
And then at the age of 93, we lost the veteran stage and screen performer, Kay Ballard. You may remember her from The Mothers-in-Law on TV. She was a comedian. Her longtime, I interviewed her about 10 or 15 years ago for a calendar about Legends of the Village. She's quite gracious. Her longtime companion was a woman. When she was questioned about this, she basically said, I haven't had sex in 25 years or something, but I live with a woman.
Well, she was asked why, whether she would come, whether she was a lesbian. She said, I've done everything twice. And then she was asked about coming out, and she said, I'm glad for Ellen and Rosie, but I won't. And she really was quite, had her back up about it.
She did, but Steve Ashkenazi, who we work with at the Hedrick Martin Institute, ran a club in the Village and had her perform there. And he said he was at the party where Liz Smith stole Kay Ballard's girlfriend.
Don't we all wish we were there?
All right. Can we get to some bad stories?
As if we haven't already. Go right
Well,
ahead.
in New York, this is in New York City. There's a trans woman who was Linda Dominguez, who was suing the New York Police Department for charging her with something called false personalization. She was stopped by the police. She's done some transitioning, so she got a little confused about whether to give her former name or her current name, and they started harassing her and mocking her gender identity.
They locked her up overnight.
She worked with handcuffs. And she works with Make the Road, which is a great activist group. So the NYCLU and the ACLU are backing her up and suing the police department.
She was walking home from work across a park,
in the Bronx.
cops said, oh, the park is closed, you're not allowed here. And they threw her in jail overnight.
This is what is done to trans people all the time.
Unbelievable.
And in a state where trans rights are supposed to be protected. And obviously they're not educating the police department about this. I mean, it took a long time to educate them about gay stuff, and that doesn't always succeed.
Well, in 2012, they put out guidelines to the police department about how to treat trans people, and they supposedly educated everyone, and it's a total waste of time. They've done nothing, and this is what happens.
Right.
All right, so also in New York City, there is a young person named Desmond who performs at 11 years old as Desmond is Amazing. There is Desmond
I
with
have seen Desmond's act. It's quite energetic.
Dad, yeah. So Desmond was performing at a club
A gay bar in Williamsburg.
$3 bill, and the right wing got wind of this, and they started assaulting the city child welfare agency with complaints that Desmond was being abused by the family.
And apparently, every time they get a complaint, they have to do a 60-day investigation where they go to the home every day to check up what's going on. The family says this is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
But Desmond says,
including at 3 a.m.
Desmond says, I like to entertain people. It makes them happy.
Yeah. All right. Now, in Austin, Texas, another horrible story. A gay couple, Tristan Perry and Spencer Deering, on the left and right, were walking down the street hand in hand.
They had just left a gay bar.
Some guy comes by them and starts muttering faggots under his breath, and one of them says, "Excuse me?" Whereupon 4 other guys join the first guy, and they beat the living daylights out of these guys.
I mean, they knocked Tristan unconscious, and Spencer was beaten about the head. They're both lucky to be alive at this point.
Yes.
Now, they say they moved from Corpus Christi to Austin for a more tolerant atmosphere, which normally would happen. They do not plan to stop holding hands in public, they said.
Good for them. Back to New York City, Jackson Heights, Queens. A gay couple walks into a tattoo parlor. Sounds like the beginning of an amusing story, but no. The owner of the tattoo parlor starts gay bashing them and
calling them faggot and all that, yes.
Oh, terrible.
And there was a big press conference about this. It's terrible.
Yeah.
What else?
I got another one in the same vein. This is just something you might want to see. The Vice news organization did a 7-minute documentary with Reggie Bullock, star of the Detroit Pistons, where he talks about the murder of his trans sister. And it's quite moving, and you can find it online.
HBO? Vice?
Vice.
Aren't they on HBO?
They are. I don't know if this actually aired on HBO, but it's findable online if you just look up Vice and
Reggie Bullock. Some justice. In Haines City, Florida, the jury convicted Rashante Anglin for the 2016 murder of Mercedes Successful, a 32-year-old drag performer. He faces life in prison. She was found dead in a dumpster.
Well, I think I can end this with a couple of good things. In California and San Francisco, the Gay Men's Chorus is buying a building to establish a national LGBTQ arts center. There are local arts centers, of course, around the country, but they want to do a national one that has performance space, recording facilities, rehearsal halls, all of that. So they expect to open that by the end of the year.
Now, Parents Magazine has been around for almost 100 years, and for the first time, they put a gay couple on the cover with their kids, their twins. It was an article illustrating surrogacy. The kids look very happy. Obviously, the right wing is bleeding about it, but
they've done stories on gay parenting before, but this is the first cover story, and they say that it is the best received issue they have ever published. The cover models are celebrity fitness trainer Sean T. and his partner and business partner Scott Blocker.
Right.
And the twins. So congratulations to them. And, just a note, the Parks Department of New York City, which has its headquarters in the Arsenal building in Central Park on 5th Avenue at 64th Street, has an exhibit up, Power to the People, which has wonderful pictures of protests and demos and including early Pride festivals and marches, and that's going to be up through the end of February. So
Okay. We're going to tell you about some more things. So get your pens and papers out to take notes for the end of the show. We're going to give you some more invitations that you can go to.
yes.
International news. Well, in Chechnya, the horror show, the authorities have ordered people to kill LGBT members of their own families and have demanded ransoms for the release of some detained LGBT from the relatives. There have been 40 detentions in the city of Argun. You mentioned that the U.S. State Department called for an investigation, but
Blah,
of course,
blah, blah.
nothing is being done about this.
So a lot of them have been released now, but the authorities are keeping their passports. So they can't leave the country. Meanwhile, there is an effort to get people out of the country
Well,
to save
when they do
them.
leave the country, sometimes they go and try to hunt them down.
Yeah.
Or they say, we're going to kill your family back home if you don't come back and let us torture you.
In Indonesia, militant Islamists attacked an HIV prevention office for LGBT activities.
Suspicion of LGBT activities.
Yeah, and they say this is now a 3-year government-run moral panic
This
in
was organized
Indonesia.
by a city council member
Yeah.
in Pekanbaru,
In
if you've ever been there.
In Pakistan, Indonesia does not sound safe these days, or parts of it anyway.
Used to be, not now.
Pakistan, an extremist has been arrested for the 2016 murders of 2 gay activists. I remember that case. But they suspect that there really were 7 people involved
I
in the
had
murder.
it down for Bangladesh, but maybe I'm wrong.
Whatever.
All right. All right. In Egypt, the court sentenced a TV host, Mohammed Al-Ghaiti, to a year in prison for contempt of religion, incitement to debauchery, and immorality for interviewing a gay man on TV.
It's true. A year in prison. In the UK, you think you watch this Brexit stuff back and forth. Well, here's something that you may not have thought about, which is that as part of the European Union, the UK has been subject to some very progressive rules protecting LGBT rights that cover all of Europe. But if Brexit takes hold and the UK is out of the European Union,
they'll be free.
well, they may lose some of the protections for LGBT
Because the
people.
government is not fully committed to the Human Rights Act and doing it on their own.
Right. But meanwhile, good news from Manchester, England, where Manchester Pride has adopted the rainbow flag that adds the black and brown stripes.
Yes, and the rainbow flag was never patented, and you can do
No.
whatever you want with it.
Yep. And they did that
Even
to
Trump held it up
address
hypocritically.
racism. Well, he didn't hold up the one with the black and brown stripes.
No. He wouldn't have known what it was anyway.
No, and there's the usual debate over it, but we think they did a good thing.
We've been telling you about all the trouble in Kenya, but they could legalize homosexuality in February if a court case is successful.
We'll see. We'll see whether that, goes into effect. Meanwhile, Michael Petrelis, activist, went to Cuba with a lot of rainbow stickers and bracelets, and everywhere he turned, he got pulled aside, questioned
Is he
at
still
the
alive?
airport. He's home safe and sound in San Francisco, but he was pulled out of the line at the airport coming in and taken to a government office when he was in Havana and pulled aside again,
None
leaving.
of that bothers Michael.
Well, please, he's tweeting all about it. It's all over Facebook. But he was told not to attend demonstrations or meetings or whatever.
In El Salvador, the Supreme Court tossed a marriage equality lawsuit. And now they're required to legalize same-sex marriage under the order of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, but they certainly are putting up all the obstacles they can.
They said it was a technical decision, but nonetheless.
Yeah. And the Czech Republic could become the first post-communist country to legalize same-sex marriage. The bill gets its first reading this week. There's an opposing bill, too. Currently, they have civil partnerships. The majority of the public supports same-sex marriage, but the outcome is uncertain. curtain, so you're just going to have to keep watching.
The majority,
Gay USA.
The majority in this country doesn't want to build a wall either, but you see where that's getting us.
71% don't want to build the wall.
In Japan, a lesbian couple who were married in Germany, one of the women is Japanese, one of the women is German. They got married in Germany. They went back to Japan. They applied to have their marriage recognized, and the Japanese government said,
Are these the ones who are getting married all over the world?
No.
No. That's another couple.
Another couple. These two are suing for recognition of their marriage. They will join 10 other couples in filing that lawsuit in February. And in Singapore, an activist...
It's a traditional marriage of the old Axis powers. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Oh, Andy. In Singapore, an activist is filing suit against the sodomy law, calling that unconstitutional. We'll see how far he gets.
Right. And I wish the couple well.
Thank you.
No more war. All right. The Oscar nominations.
Yes.
Well, did you have some AIDS news?
No.
We did talk about AIDS during the Trump nonsense and how they're taking our drugs away.
Yeah.
The Oscar nominations, it really very heavily LGBT in terms of themes and characters. So in the Best Picture category, you've got LGBT themes or subplots in The Favorite, Vice, about Dick Cheney and, of course, his lesbian daughter, Bohemian Rhapsody, Freddie Mercury, and Green Book, where one of the main characters is gay.
And, of course, the AIDS theme in Bohemian Rhapsody, too, which I
yes.
finally saw and did not enjoy.
It's a pretty standard biopic. It's lively, but,
The music is great, no question, but...
And it shows you how some of the songs evolved, and there's some of that.
It's really pretty simple.
We have very high standards.
Well, I love The Favorite. The Favorite has to be one of my real favorites.
And Olivia Colman, as Queen Anne in that picture, is nominated, and she's definitely, well, at least bisexual in that film, and we only get to see the lesbian part.
Yeah.
And Melissa McCarthy as Lee Israel in Can You Ever Forgive Me? And she's broken through.
A lesbian part.
Yeah, which takes place at Julius's, and of course she's nominated with her supporting actor Richard E. Grant, who plays a gay man with HIV/AIDS in that, and it's a breakthrough for him because he's never gotten any awards.
And then you have the three women in The Favorite: Olivia Colman for Best Actress, Rachel Weisz and Emma Stone for supporting, all messing around with each other.
Olivia's up for Best Actress.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Okay, and then they're up for supporting.
Yeah, but they're all a lesbian trio of sorts.
Well, for political purposes in many cases, and
but fun to watch. Very fun movie. If you haven't seen The Favorite, it's a lot of fun.
And Rami Malek, who plays Freddie Mercury. Rami Malek, let's call the whole thing off, is up for Best Actor for Bohemian Rhapsody. And then in the documentary short category, now this is not a gay-specific movie, it's called Endgame, about medical practitioners working on the edges of life and death, but it is made by Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman. There they are. They won Academy Awards for The Times of Harvey Milk in 1985 and for Common Threads, Stories from the Quilt, which was about the quilt.
Don't they produce half of Hollywood? They do everything.
They're great.
Also, there is a lesbian film up for Best Live Action Short. It's a French-Canadian film called Marguerite. It's just 20 minutes long. It's actually from a year or two ago, but somehow it meandered into this category this year. I've seen it. It's kind of touching, compassionate. I don't want to give the whole thing away. It's only 19 minutes.
Can we see it online already?
I don't know.
Marguerite.
Yeah, someone sent it to me, so I watched it. But if you're picking favorites in the shorts category, I'm not sure it's a winner, but I haven't seen the others, so I don't know.
It's best not to see them if you're trying to predict.
And I guess gay adjacent, If Beale Street Could Talk, since it's based on the book by James Baldwin.
Yes.
So we could throw that in our basket, too.
He was gay.
But no gay attachment, but one of my favorites that I was happy to see nominated for Best Foreign Language Film is Shoplifters, Japanese. Really,
a lot of foreign films this year.
Or is it South Korean? I should
Now,
double
you saw
check
Roma, which is...
I liked Roma a lot. I really liked Roma, so I'm happy for Roma. I'm happy for
And you
Shoplifters.
say with Roma, stay with it, because in the beginning it's a little slow.
It's 2 hours and 15 minutes. I would say the first hour and a half is a little slow, but the last 45 minutes really picks up. But the whole thing is beautiful and wonderful.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, but keep your eye on Shoplifters, too.
Looking forward to that.
All right, and a movie coming up, not out yet, Spider-Man, Far From Home, the next iteration of that series, is going to have 2 trans actors in it.
Zach Barak is going to play a friend to Tom Holland's Peter Parker, and Tyler Luke Cunningham is a featured extra. This is a breakthrough.
You may also want to be watching Fox, of all things, Sunday night for the live performance of Rent. Which is supposed to be a really lively version of it. I never saw Rent.
Oh.
I never saw the play. I never saw the movie. I will be watching
I was there
Rent.
when it opened.
Yeah.
I had to wear earplugs, but it's quite moving.
Well, it's got wonderful music, too.
Yes. There is a new musical coming from, how do you say this guy's name? B.B. Winans?
Yes.
Yes. It's called Born for This. He made his name on the PTL Club with Jim Baker and
Well, the Winans family is
Faye.
they're a big gospel family.
He said Jim became his parent and will be at the opening, so maybe we can have a picket.
I admit that I tuned into the first episode of the new episodes of Big Brother, because I wanted to see what Anthony Scaramucci was going to do. Like last time it was Omarosa, now they've got the Mooch. But I was so amused, of course, to see Julie Chen introduce it as, "Hi, I'm Julie Chen Moonves." Okay.
The new book about by the staffer about the chaos in the
Yeah.
White House really documents the 11 days or whatever it was of the Mooch.
Well, he did make a comment in the first episode about the craziness in the White House and the people around the president.
This is the insanity.
There is a gay contestant on Big Brother at the moment, Jonathan Bennett from Cake Wars, who is gay.
By the way, it's not gay specific, but there's also a musical in the works on Jean-Michel Basquiat. Basquiat, directed by John Doyle.
And Stormy Daniels has come out as bisexual.
She has.
Yes, she has.
We want to invite people to some things before we run out of time, don't we?
Oh, we have a couple minutes. We're not short.
We want to invite you.
She came out because she did a podcast with Dan Savage, and he was so charmed by her that he invited her to come to some performance he was doing. And as they talked about sex, and people got mad at her online and said, something, she said, I am bisexual. So I enjoy sex with men and women.
As it goes.
But not Donald Trump.
Donald Trump used to go out with a bisexual.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, we want to invite you. The New York Public Library is doing this exhibit that'll be up for a while. It's called Love and Resistance, Stonewall 50. We have the invitation there, the information there on the screen. It's going to be at the library, which is at 5th and 42nd, from February 14th, and you're invited to the opening. So if you
Free.
go, you can
Food and drink.
You can write to them at nyplevents@nypl.org or call them at 212-930-0548, and you can come to the opening. So,
they're going to have a lot of historic photographs and artifacts from the movement, from the early days,
we're going to
from
be
the last
there.
50 years.
I think we're even on the
certainly are.
invitation.
We are.
So we're inviting
hosts.
you.
Yes.
We're inviting you.
And really, they have room for a couple thousand people, so don't hesitate to come.
Please.
February 14th at 6:30, but you must RSVP to get on the list. And the other thing I want to highlight is the Guggenheim Museum on Fifth Avenue is opening a huge Mapplethorpe exhibit of all their collection and everything. And that's going to be on for the next year. And the new Mapplethorpe movie, a sort of biopic, is opening here March 1st. So keep your eye out for that. But I think the Guggenheim exhibit is going to be the thing.
Thanks for watching. We hope we have better news next week.
We do.